If you're a real estate agent and you're tired of cold calling, door knocking, and spending money on ads, then subscribe to this podcast. We discuss leveraging the power of YouTube for your real estate business and how these strategies earned us over $1 million in GCI our first year in real estate. My name is Levi Lascsak and my partner is Travis Plumb. Let's get started.
All right, welcome. Welcome to the Passive Prospecting Podcast. And today we've got a very special guest on, my man Gabe with the Real Estate Investing Club. And this is something that I'm very interested to talk about because this is a focus for myself and Travis this year. You know, this is something that I really have started my educational process on. Because I just think this is the way to go is multifamily investment, storage buildings, which I love that Gabe is mostly invested in that, mobile home parks, those types of things. And I think that this is a very important subject because they always joke around that real estate agents never retire. And why is that? Because they end up transacting on homes their entire career and they never acquire them. And they probably get first look at most of the best deals out there. But at the same time, doing that single family home by single family home could take a lot longer, a lot more logistics. I mean, I remember before I got into licensed real estate, I dabbled in real estate. I called myself a part-time investor because I didn't earn a full-time income off of it, but I had 7 rentals at once. And I made the mistake of selling out everything in 2019 because I thought the market was at a peak at that time. And I thought, man, we're coming into so I was like, at some point we're going to crash. So for those of you that are always trying to time the market, yes, I probably could have made a couple of extra 6 figures just if I would have waited one more year. But knowing what I know now as well, again, remember, I wasn't in the position I'm in now. And I wasn't educating myself enough on the space because I would have never, ever sold those properties knowing what I know now. But I had bought them. I had traditional landlord fatigue, you could say. And I started picking them up around 2010, 2011, of course, when properties were still pretty low. They were mostly foreclosures. I put a little money into them. And I figured out this cool little thing where you put 20% down on one, renovate it, rehab it a little bit, and then wait 6 months, refinance, pull some cash out, and then just use that money to put down on the next property, right? And so I got in that motion and did that every 6 months to a year over the next 7 years. Yeah, I probably just really acquired maybe one per year through 2017, and then had them for 2017 to 2019, and I was like, oh. I did not understand systems, processes, people, all those things I talk about now with YouTube, right? Which, but what's funny about that is not only did I sold way too, I sold, which I would never sell ever again as I start my journey again. I just didn't understand that systems, processes, people. And that was the thing that, over the summer of 2020, whenever I lost my financial services business and I had to start over and I was looking at real estate, that was one of the things that I had to tell myself, which was, I'm not going to get myself in this position ever again. I'm not going to, sorry, we got a hot mic there. Had to shut him down. So I'm not going to put myself in that position again to where, there's the system and process and people for everything. And before you just give up on something or you quit or you sell or anything like that, just think, hey, could I put something in place that will help automate a majority or all of this process? And so that's what I started to dig into my research as far as whenever I was deciding to become a real estate agent, which kept me, again, for those that know my full story, like I had a friend trying to get me in real estate 20 years ago, but I never wanted to be a real estate agent. So I just thought, man, if I'm going to do it now, I know now because I had been educating myself over the last couple of years about marketing in general and some systems and processes. I just hadn't implemented them before. So now that I've done this over the last 2 years, we transacted over 200 transactions in my first 2 years here in real estate. But I was like, I don't want to be that transactional real estate agent forever either. So what do? I start my education process. And where does that lead me? It leads me into acquiring properties, investment, multifamily, and storage, all these types of things, because that's where I hear it time and time again, and especially whenever I dig into multifamily, they will say, don't buy 12 units. You better just buy 120 units versus 12 units. And so, those types of things, some multifamily investors will say, don't even go less than 35 or, 42 or 48. Everybody kind of like has their number. But what I hear from that is do more, do more. And really it's just a multiplication math problem at that point, right? I mean, if you have to do something for 12 units, you could probably do the exact same thing for 120 units, and it's just going to take just a little bit, effort. It's really kind of like a compound effect, is that you kind of have that upfront work, but once you reach the peak and you go over the edge, you start to coast, right? Or things start to compound. So that's what I'm getting in this sense of learning about this and everything. It's like, well, might as well just start off with a significant number. But again, I know that can sound daunting. It can sound overwhelming. But again, so does YouTube, so does getting into real estate, getting your license. Everything we do in the beginning is always overwhelming and a lot, drinking from a fire hose in the beginning. And it just really starts with the education process. Just like I started researching YouTube before I got involved, I just researched. And then whenever I felt like I had a good enough grasp, not analysis paralysis, but a good enough grasp to get started, I just got started, and I've learned along the way. And again, I don't want to get caught up in the trap of being a transactional real estate agent. I want to build long-term wealth. I want to build cash flow. I want to build, acquire assets. And from my research and my understanding, what I'm seeing over and over and over again is, multifamily is the way to go. So, and as I dig into some of that, I've been having discussions about storage and all that stuff. So Gabe, who's here with us today, I'm going to turn it over to him, is that really started recently as well, right? Gabe, did you start in 2020?
Yeah, I mean,
from what I saw,
I was a dabbler for a long time. I was in corporate, and I did single family on the side. I'd do flips, I'd do wholesales, all that kind of stuff for ever since 2014, I think. But it wasn't until we found the property my first commercial property was a mobile home RV park.
How are you?
And we got that one at the very end of 2019. Then we closed on it in 2020. So yeah, I haven't been on the commercial side for very long, but it hockey sticks pretty quickly. A lot of the things you're saying, I totally agree with. Especially starting small is not the way to go. You start big, and it's not just the scale. It's also there's safety in larger numbers. If you're starting small, your NOI is not very large. And so if you have one mistake that happens in the property, like pipes break, whatever, things always happen in real estate. So if you have one of those things happen, it'll cut into your profits a lot more than if you had a huge property that generated a lot of income. So
allow me to take a quick break to remind you that we have very important links in the description below. If you want the full story of how we closed over $1 million in commissions our first year and over $2.3 million in commissions our second year, check out the first link. Also, you have the link to our #1 Amazon best-selling book, Passive Prospecting. Last, if you enjoy this podcast and you're a giving person, leave a 5-star review, please. Now back to the episode.
But yeah, started in 2020, and since then I've been in, I bought 2 mobile home RV parks and then got into self-storage, and that's where we're focusing on today. Self-storage and industrial. We haven't closed on an industrial property yet, but I'm really looking into that because it's basically a big self-storage facility that can be rented at triple net, and triple net is where it's at. So yeah.
No apartments at this time.
No, I'm not opposed. I've owned multifamily, but I like self-storage. I like self-storage and mobile home RV better.
Because
there's nothing against it. There's a lot of,
you don't have to deal with the plumbing. Is that why?
No, there's nothing there's nothing against multifamily. It is a great asset. It's just that it's not a business. People are living there in the property. And so I like the business to business relationship or the business to consumer where self-storage is essentially a product. And nobody's living there. And I just like that a little bit better than multifamily. And I mean, the cash flow with mobile home RV and self-storage is a little bit better than in multifamily, but there's also fewer of them out there. So, some positives and negatives there.
And mobile home, because you're basically just renting the space. Is that it?
Yeah, mobile home RV are great because it's land lease, and so you don't own. I mean, a lot of the times when you buy a mobile home or RV park, mobile home mostly, they will have park-owned homes in the park. But when we bought the first mobile home park out here, it had mobile homes in it, but we quickly sold those to the current tenants, and then we just owned the land, and that's kind of the ideal space there.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's kind of start at the beginning because this is something. It's funny. I go through the multifamily podcast and stuff. I did this the other day, and I was like, I couldn't find like an episode where it was always they're always so far along, right? You got to go like way back to the beginning or things like that. So let's just kind of start at the beginning. You're close to 600 units now, really since 2020, so around there, right? Or you were dabbling, but you've done a majority of your acquisition since 2020.
Yeah, well, everything in commercial has been 2020, and self-storage. The 600 number is deceiving because self-storage. You asked how many units I had. Yep. That includes self-storage, and self-storage. Yep. You buy one facility and it has 500 units in it, and so for mobile home RV parks, we have about 80 pads, and then for self-storage, it's the remainder. It's like 300-ish.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's the way people do it in apartments too, right? They buy one complex and they're like, I've got 80 units. So as long as you got rent coming in on each of those.
Yeah.
And
there's 5 facilities and then 2 mobile home RV parks.
Yeah. And I guess what you could love about storage too, right? If somebody stops paying, you get to sell their stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, no.
You don't? Okay. Well, I thought
when people stop, you have to do an auction. I mean, that's part of the process. But when people stop paying, it's because what they have in the unit is junk. You're never going to find good things in those units, and so that's not a perk of owning a self-storage facility. It's actually a negative because you got to do a bunch of dump runs. But there's a lot of other good things about self-storage. Mainly, self-storage, there's no utilities that you have to deal with. There is plumbing usually for the office,
right?
But it's so minimal and things never go wrong. The things that you have to worry about is mostly like vandalism, and that's mostly the biggest concern is vandalism for self-storage.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's start with the beginning, and let's try to keep this pretty, because I know we've got a short window here, and I want to just kind of jump into some meat and potatoes that people can start to chew on. How did you start your educational process on this?
In
real estate. Yeah, and that could be is it websites, podcasts? Is there books, anything in particular that you kind of started saying, okay, I'm going to move into multifamily or storage units or RV parks? Where do I start kind of digesting that information?
Yeah, the first one was Matt Tirialt. He had an investing course. Matt Tirialt's awesome. He's out of California. And then that was just for single family. And then when I decided that I wanted to have cash flow versus, lump sums of income, and I don't wanted to own properties, then I just I looked at YouTube. So I was on Bigger Pockets. I was just kind of, I was talking to a bunch of people before COVID. I was going to a lot of meetups, talking to property owners and stuff like that. And then COVID happened and I started the podcast so I could keep doing that. And that kind of expanded my education. And eventually I landed on self-storage mobile home RV.
All right, cool. Have you read any of the Bigger Pocket books on multifamily?
No, I've read not the Bigger Pocket books, but I read, man, it's been a while since I read those books. Shoot, I forget the name. It's like the $1 Million Investor or something. I think that's the name of it. I read a couple books, not a ton, but it was mostly for the education. It was mostly YouTube. I was watching YouTube videos.
Okay. Which channels?
You're killing me. I actually don't remember. It's been a long time since my education has since switched to just talking with guests on my podcast. But
okay, gotcha. So basically, your podcast is where we should start.
Yeah, well, my podcast is how I teach myself these days. But before I had the podcast, I would watch YouTube channels. Matt Tiriel, I watched his channels.
How do you spell his last name?
I think it's Theriault, something like that.
Okay. Cool.
He's a big he's in multifamily. He's a big multifamily guy.
Okay.
If people are looking for multifamily resources, I had Gino on my podcast from Jake and Gino.
Yeah.
Those guys are they've got it locked down when it comes to education in the multifamily space. So that's a good place to start.
Thanks. Okay, cool. Yeah, I like those guys. They're cool. All right, Jake. Yeah, the Jake and Gino show. So you can check out that podcast, and you might find one of those episodes with me on it.
There you go.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. All right, cool. Let me see. All right, so once you started there, then you're going to meetups, you're talking to people, and how did one of your first deals start to come to fruition? Was it through networking, or are you out driving around just looking for random stuff? Are you searching online? What's the steps there? Next steps.
Yeah. So the first commercial deal was mobile home park. And that was, I was, networking, meeting people. I ended up meeting a guy who had taken a mobile home park investing course. And he was interested in that. And at the time, this is when I was switching focus to commercial, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to invest in. I was looking at multifamily. But I met this guy, and he said he was doing mobile home parks, and he gave me the sales pitch on why it's better than multifamily, aka you just own the land. And I was like, that makes sense. Let's do it. And so we bought lists. We started doing cold calling. We got in contact with a guy out here in Washington who owned a park in George. And it was a funny story because he's a potato farmer, and he basically owned the entire city of George because he wanted to turn it into a colonial themed city. He didn't end up doing that, and so he owned all this land out there. So he wanted to sell us this small, the park, which was in this city, and we negotiated seller financing. We bought it for, I think it was 10 or 15% down, and he gave us, I think it was 3.8 or 3.25 or something like that percent interest, which at the time was near what it should have been, but now it's way higher. But yeah, then we closed on it, and that was the first deal.
All right, cool. So what did you learn from that one? What did you do wrong?
Well, I mean, that was the first commercial property, and that was a big lesson in onboarding new properties. So to onboard that property, we went out. We had a barbecue with all the tenants, and we started to get, these people weren't on leases. There was no paperwork involved. It was just cash based, and we wanted to get systems and processes in place. And so we started doing that, but we did not have it organized well enough. And so organizing a very clean and crisp transition in ownership is super important, because you don't want to, lose documentation, all that kind of stuff. But I think we got really lucky in the seller financing. Well, not really lucky, because most of the properties that I bought are seller financing. You just gotta keep hammering away until you get it. But we did get seller financing. I thought that was really good. And the other thing that we learned is to get a sewer scope. We knew that this was an older park, and so we knew we would have to do some repairs, but it turned out one of the sewer lines was just completely destroyed, and we didn't do a full sewer inspection, and we should have, and we ended up having to pay for the replacement. The park generated enough cash flow to where it paid for it itself, but it's still something that we should have added to our due diligence.
Okay. So let's maybe go there then. So I know this was titled A Crash Course in Deal Structuring. Do you have do you have, I'm assuming you have, hopefully, otherwise this is going to be completely awkward. Now, you kind of have a system for deal structuring as far as what you do. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. And I love talking about deal structuring, because so many times people will talk with a seller and they will, the seller will shoot out a price and they're just automatically going to say yes or no. Like this doesn't work. It's too high. And they're going to move on. But if you work with the seller, generally you can make a deal work with seller financing. And because it's a win-win for both parties. The seller, he becomes the bank, which is what everybody wants to be. The banks are always, it's the enviable position, because you're just getting money sent to you with interest, and which is very nice. So they become the bank and you get to structure the deal to make it work for you. I'm going to give an example here. In one of the self-storage facilities I bought out here out in Indianapolis, it was 150 units. It had additional area to expand, and so only half of the parcel had been utilized. And there were already plans and permits and everything in place to allow for that expansion. The seller wanted more than what it was worth. He wanted a 5 cap at the time. That was, for this area, it just didn't make sense. So he wanted a higher price than it was actually worth, but we were able to get the deal done because we structured it in a way that made sense for him and it made sense for us. We got seller financing, 10% down, and then we did interest only payments. And so the monthly payment was lower, which allowed, and that lasted for 20 years. And so we got interest only payments for 20 years, which means that we could still cash flow the property, and then buy it. And then, we're raising the rents, we're doing all the renovations. Eventually we're going to be doing the expansion. And so when you're looking at it from a 10-year perspective, it's going to be a killer deal. It's going to be great. When you look at it just from the perspective of the price point that we bought it at, nobody would want to buy it. Because it wasn't a good deal. It didn't make sense until we put in the seller financing, until we put in, interest only payments, stuff like that really made it start to shine.
Okay. So explain a little bit on, do you have a format with seller financing? Because if the seller, it's my understanding, right? You either offer somebody their price or the terms, right? They almost like if they want this particular price, then you got to say, well, I would like to make the terms. Or if they say, well, here are my terms, then you say, well, I get to set the price. Is that the way it generally works that you've seen, or how would you explain that?
Yeah, I usually just start to try to understand what the seller wants. A lot of times, they'll want, if they want to cash out, then we'll walk them through our own underwriting of the deal, and show them exactly what we're looking at, and just saying, like, do you think this is reasonable? There's no cash flow here. Usually they'll be understandable. And so it starts with what the seller wants, and then we try to structure it from there. If they want a higher price point, then we'll just say, like, we can make this work, and this is how we're going to make it work. And that same thing happened with the mobile home park we bought, the second mobile home park out here in Washington, in Moses Lake. Another seller finance deal. The seller, he said he wanted $5,000 a month, and he said he wanted X amount for the purchase price. And we were like, well, that's too much. That's it's more than it's worth, and $5,000 is more than we should be paying. But we made it work because we did seller financing again. Low down payment, 10%. And then we gave it 2.8% interest. So really low interest, which made the numbers actually work out. And so we started with what he wanted. He wanted this much per month. He wanted this price. We used those as the variables that are set in place. And then we made everything else work around those variables, to the point where we got a deal done.
Very nice. What was the, do you mind sharing the numbers of that deal? Like what you put down, what was the interest? Can we?
Yeah, I only remember the monthly and then the interest rate, because I've said that on podcasts before. I don't remember what the actual purchase price was. I think it was, shoot, I don't remember. I think it was like 700,000, something like that. It wasn't a lot, but I mean,
what was the interest only payment?
That one was for this Indianapolis, the self-storage facility. And that was 5% interest only on, I think we had it under contract for 1.4 million and we put 200,000 down. And then the rest was, I think that math works out, 5% interest only on 1.2 million. That should be about $5,000.
So your payment was 5,000 a month. And how much was the units producing each month?
So the cash flow on that, the current performance was about 10,000 a month. That's gross, not net. And so, but we, did our underwriting. He was under market with rents. And so we figured it could get to about 14 to 15,000, and that's without the expansion potential. And so that was another lesson learned.
Why did you think you could get to 14 to 15?
We did a market study for the units, and so
they were undervalued on their rents.
They were under market on their rents. And the other lesson, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned that I should have known. Everybody knows this about real estate. It's all about location. That is the most important lesson in real estate that I've learned so far, is that it's all about location. Not only the city that you're buying it in, but in the specific block that you're buying whatever asset on. It's like, I bought a self-storage facility out in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is a metro that's doing, the numbers work out. It has a positive net migration. People are moving there. The numbers in terms of the net rentable square feet per capita is pretty good. And so it's not oversaturated when it comes to self-storage. Everything looked good from the outside. I bought the facility. And then I found that the exact location that this facility was on was just all the time I've been dealing with vandalism. And so it was a high crime area. And that's something I didn't know going into it. And since then I've been really, really diligent about trying to understand exactly the corner that I'm buying my property on. What is it like there? I call the police station. I call property managers in the area. I get as much information as I can on that location to understand what I'm going to be dealing with when I do buy that property.
Okay. Anything else they can look online? Any websites or anything, or?
Yeah, I mean, best places. I always start with best places just because the first criteria that I can use to stop, to say no to a property is the metro itself. If it's not growing, then I'm not going to buy it. If it doesn't have a positive net migration, it's not worth looking into. And so that's the very first thing I do is I go on best places. I check out the metro. Is it growing? Yes. Great. Let's go a little further. If it's not growing, not worth it. After that, then we dig deeper into, into a lot of things. Then we'll start doing, I first call property managers in the area and ask about the location. I ask what they think of it. Do they manage anything in the area? What kind of issues do they run into? I'll call the police station. Like I said, I ask about if there's been any reports for that location, like how many police calls do they get for it? And what other resources do I use in terms of, so I use for self-storage, I use a software called Track IQ, and it has a bunch of information on self-storage. I mean, if you're interested in self-storage, the thing that you got to know before you buy is the saturation point. And that's like, how many net rentable square feet do you have per capita in that area? Obviously, you got to make sure that there's not a 60% vacancy with all the facilities in the area, but then you also just kind of want to look at how many square feet are there in the area per person. The general, like the industry consensus is like between 8 and 12 is where the saturation point is reached. And that's where it doesn't make sense to build. And you got to watch out for buying, because it might be, you might be experiencing vacancy.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, where are you looking for these deals?
How am I looking for them, or what locations am I looking for them?
Yeah, that's two very good questions. Yeah. Where, clearly, I think you kind of answered that though. Preferably lower crime areas, growing populations, growing metros, I presume. We're not putting a bunch of these out in the country. So closer.
Well, there are, we'll look at deals if they're within a 30-minute drive of a major metro.
Of course. Yeah.
But the biggest thing that I learned, another big thing that I learned when buying commercial, is choose a metro and focus on it, or a couple of metros. Once you buy in an area, use that as your footprint, as your flag, place that flag, and then start expanding. Because we just started buying facilities where we found good deals. But I quickly found that every facility you buy, every mobile home park, every multifamily, whatever, you have to build a team around that facility, around that property. And so if you build a team around one property, you might as well continue in that area, because then you can use that same team to expand your footprint. And so if you're buying in all these different areas, it just means a lot of work in building all these different teams, all these people you have to talk to. So how we've kind of been changing is we've been focusing in on metros. We own a couple in Dallas, Fort Worth. So that's one of the metros we're looking at. We're looking at focusing in on. Indianapolis is another metro. And so we're just really kind of doubling down on the metros where we have a footprint or where we want to expand. We own in Lubbock, Texas, and Hot Springs, a couple other small metros, and we're selling them all off because I don't want to have a portfolio that's super expanded and not centralized.
Really? Why is that?
It's just because it makes management difficult, and you lose a lot of the economies of scale. If you have 3 facilities near each other, you can use the same boots on the ground, the same property manager to service all 3 of those facilities. Versus if you had them each in separate metros, you'll have to have one person for each facility, which means you have to pay each one of those people, versus one person to service them all. And you can even pay that person more and still save on the aggregate.
Okay. All right. So what are next steps from there?
You mean once you choose a metro?
Mm-hmm.
Then you just got to start finding deals, and that's the hard part.
All right. So you don't live in Dallas. So no. How are you looking for deals in Dallas?
So we got a whole process behind this. We got starts with the data. Always starts with the data. You got to find a good list. There's lists out there you can buy. I like to start with a list of facilities, and then I hire a VA to go in, literally use Google Maps and find those properties that are not listed on Google.
You're buying a list of storage facilities?
Yeah. And you can do this with any type of asset class. We look at storage and industrial in Dallas.
Where do you buy that list from?
So I have a subscription to Crexy, Property Radar. There's tons of them. List Source. You can just go if you type anywhere in Facebook and say I'm looking for a list, there's going to be some Indian dude that reaches out to you and say, hey, I have a list. There's tons of lists that you can get out there.
Okay.
So you get that list, and then you just use that as your starting point because it's not going to be comprehensive. So that's your list that you start with. You can skip trace that list, start getting some leads rolling in. But after that, you've really you double down on the metro. Like I said, I got a VA, and they'll literally, go into Google Maps and search specific areas and look for facilities that it's obviously a self-storage facility, but it's not listed on Google, because those are the ones that are, that's where the real money is made, is finding those off-market deals that aren't actively marketed.
Okay, so you're just getting a list of all storage facilities, trying to find the areas where you would like to be in, and then you're going to skip trace property or the storage facility owners. You can do that?
Yep.
And once you do that, then you're making some phone calls.
Yeah. Then we send mailers, we do phone calls. We just try to get in contact with them any way we can. And if they're not interested at that point, we ask, can we keep in contact with you? And then we reach out over months and months and months, and eventually we get deals done.
All right. Well, there you go.
Easy peasy.
That easy, right? All right. Well, what's the other criteria? I mean, I know in an area, I mean, are you looking for any development opportunities? Are you looking for land and you want to build, or are you looking for existing structures that you can raise the rents or expand like you've done on the other projects? Or are you open to just a good deal in general? If you find land, have you done that before? Are you working on any development projects?
Yeah, that Indianapolis one that I told you about, that one is a development project. I mean, it's good. It's the ideal situation because it already has a facility on it, and that's what we really want, because we want to buy it and then we want it to cash flow until we develop. And so this had a good, sizable facility on the property already. And now there's an additional, however many acres that we can double the footprint of the property. So development is one piece of the puzzle. We don't look at, actually we have been looking for land. But that one, there's always, we're talking about passive income, there's active income in real estate, and, we're not brokers. And so to do active income, we're looking for land that we can just get permitted for a different use and sell that off, or, different things. But we do look for land. Developing isn't the thing that we're trying to do, because we want that cash flow on day one. We want to buy it, have cash flow, and do it that way.
Okay, gotcha. So you find the deal. All right. So those are some good lists. And then, anything else we should know from there? Or does that sum it up?
No, I mean, that's, with anything in real estate, it's just,
yeah, numbers. I mean, that's super high level. I mean,
yeah,
we're talking for 40 minutes here. So it's like, I get it. I know clearly there's a lot more that goes into it, but I just wanted to kind of touch on that. And I think it gives the overall concept. So you have a good outline and you understand where it's just like with anything, right? Getting your real estate license, you got to find a school. Then you find a school, then you're like, okay, now you got to buy your books or buy your course. Then you got to go. I mean, it's just a step-by-step process.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the thing that I'm always, even today, surprised with is just what is it? Is it Grant Cardone or something that guy does the 10X thing where it's like, it's going to be 10 times harder than you think it is. I don't know if that's the message that he's trying to say, but I always feel like to do whatever we need to do, it's always 10 times, it'll take 10 times more effort than we expect. And that's always been the case when it comes to finding good deals. It's really hard to find them, but once you find them, it's worth it.
Yeah. Cool. Anything you'd like to wrap up there to kind of close out the conversation?
No, I think if anybody's, interested in more about commercial side of real estate, the Real Estate Investing Club, this is the podcast, and we interview, it's mostly commercial guys that come on. We have some single family guys too, but we want to spread the love around. Other than that, just, if you guys are interested in commercial, reach out to me, Gabe at the realestateinvestingclub.com. I love helping people out. And just, keep trying it. Go bigger than you think you want to start, because, it's easier to go bigger, and it's also safer to go bigger. I made the mistake of buying a small facility, and that's not something you want to do. So go big when you start, and just keep trying until you get the results you want.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. I mean, that was a very, very quick overview, and I think just enough to get get your mind working on some things. And again, this is something I'm extremely interested in, and starting my educational process. So I appreciate you joining us today, Gabe, and let me know if there's anything I can help you out on. And if you need some boots on the ground in Dallas, I'm here. So, if there's any way we can help out, like I said, I'm right now I'm willing to work for free, just because I'm
I don't like people working for free. We always compensate anybody we work with.
Well, I'm in the educational process. So yeah, if you got anything or you need a additional opinion, or especially areas or things like that, you want to know, hey man, is this a good area, instead of relying on a VA, feel free to reach out. We can definitely help you out with that.
All right. Sounds good.
So,
thanks for having me on.
Yeah. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on today's podcast. If you're interested in partnering with us to access our YouTube course and coaching at no cost, schedule a call at passiveprospectingpartner.com.